The past is a fiction. Don't spend any time thinking about the past. It doesn't exist. It's not real. There's nothing there. You can't go back. Maybe if you have some important lessons to learn, but those lessons can be learned pretty fast. You can synthesize that data very quickly. There's no need to reminisce upon the past. I think people get trapped. A lot of people are sorting out their past when the past is just entirely contained in your head. It's not anywhere else. The easiest way is just to kind of get over any problems or reinterpret them in a way that it serves you and just move on, because the present is all that actually exists. So that's where you live, that's where you exist, that's what you got to spend time on and time within. And any moment where you're not present, you're literally squandering time. What is a good use of time? How should time be spent, right? How do you know that you're getting the most out of every moment? And so then I was like, okay, well, I want the time to be useful and engaging, and I don't want to be too mentally disturbed or anxious while I'm in that time. So what is that? Well, there's flow state. I could be in flow, but flow, the way that it was defined narrowly in that famous book, that you were engaged in a task at the edge of your capability, where you were good enough at it that you could actually pull it off, but not so good at it that it wasn't challenging to you. So you're doing challenging work at the edge of your capability, and that's flow, and that's a good use of time. Well, that's like a couple hours a day. That's not good enough. What about the rest of my day? Really, what you want out of your time is you want to be in flow every moment. And how do you get into flow every moment? Whether you're brushing your teeth or walking the dog or reading a book or speaking on Clubhouse, you have to do it in such a way that you're completely engaged. You're fully aware. You're completely present. What does that mean? That means that your mind isn't running out of control. So ultimately, if you don't want to waste time, your mind has to be under control. And you can't control your mind. It's an uncontrollable monkey. Now we're in catch-22 land. So all you can do is be aware of your mind being out of control, because that gives you a level of detachment from your mind that then lets you be in flow. So the very, very subtle answer to the very difficult question of how you should spend your time, the answer is by being self-aware within every moment. Well, you are a play of a set of infinite forces launched from the Big Bang, intersecting at this precise moment. Your inputs into that and your ability to control that are incredibly limited, if they exist at all. So the best thing to do is, of course, function to the best of your capability, but just be as aware as possible, as self-aware as possible, because you're always aware of the environment around you, right? So your awareness always extends in the environment. The problem is it extends too far out into the environment. You lose your self-awareness. Then your mind starts running crazy. You're constantly reacting to things. The moment slips away from you because you're lost in the past or the future, which don't really exist, and your time is wasted. But if you are immersed in the activity because your mind is quiet, and generally it's quiet because you're self-aware of it when it's running around, then there's a certain level of flow state that you can enter into your everyday life, and that is time well spent. It doesn't. The beauty is, if you get 100% flow state, it doesn't even have to be free time. So free time, in a sense, is a crutch. It's a crutch because you don't know how to be immersed in whatever it is that you're doing. And a truly present person, almost like an enlightened Buddha-like being, would be perfectly happy whether he or she was busting rocks in a chain gang, or playing video games, or sitting there and staring out into space. Yeah, I mean, so what you're basically saying there then is fall in love with life itself, which is hard for most people to do. It's not easy. Well, one of my favorite tweets of all time is by Charlie Knowles, who I followed on Twitter for a while, and he tweeted that at the end of the day, you have to believe that either everything is a miracle or nothing is. And that's a very deep statement. Basically, if you believe in a single miracle, like for example, if the Holy Spirit just popped up and performed one miracle in front of you, that means then there are miracles everywhere, because you can't take anything for granted. Everything has to be a miracle. Or you're completely atheistic and you believe that there are no miracles, and it's all just kind of random. But the answer to that one simple question will basically define your entire worldview. But it has to be an authentic answer. Unfortunately, we're mostly agnostic.
Most people who are past a certain age have had this feeling or phenomenon where they've gone through most of life a certain way and then gotten to a certain stage and then had to make some pretty big changes. And I'm definitely also in that boat. I think for me, I struggled for a lot of my life to have certain material and social successes. And when I achieved those material and social successes, or at least beyond the point where they didn't matter as much to me anymore, I realized that my peer group and a lot of the people who were around me, and the people who had achieved the similar successes and were on their way to achieving more and more successes, just didn't seem all that happy. And in my case, there was definitely hedonic adaptation. I'd very quickly get used to anything. It led me to the conclusion, which seems trite, that happiness is internal. And so then that set me on a path of starting to work more on my internal self, and realizing that all real success is internal and has very little to do with external circumstances. But one has to do the external thing anyway. That's how you're biologically hardwired. So it's glib to say you can just turn it off. You have to do it. And you have to have your own life experience that then brings you back onto the internal path. If anything, the worldly success has taken me further away from satisfying that urge. The more worldly success you have, the more your ego gets built up, the more fearful you might be of losing it all, the more you care what other people think, the more you have to lose, the more you get caught up in this dream of who you think you are. So I think worldly success actually hurts. If from a young age you know that you want to know yourself and discover yourself much better, if you have that foresight or insight at an early age, then material success will actually take you away from it. I actually don't think happiness is its own thing. I think a lot of what we think of as happiness is actually just pleasure. It's physical pleasure, either from, oh, that tasted good, or it might be momentary pleasure from, oh, she loves me or he loves me. But I think true happiness comes out of peace. And peace comes out of many things, but it comes out of fundamentally understanding yourself. It comes from looking inside yourself and understanding how much of what you're reacting to are emotional reactions, or attachment, is self-inflicted suffering, it's desire that you have for things that you probably shouldn't care that much about. I say yes. To everything that happens, I say yes. And that's very hard for us to imagine, because in life we're used to fighting for everything. We're used to getting whatever we want. We're used to reacting. We're used to immediately saying that stinks, that's good, that's bad. We're used to constantly judging things. And the act of judging something separates you from that thing. And over time, as you judge, you invariably judge people, you judge yourself, you separate yourself from everything, and then you end up lonely. And that feeling of disconnection and loneliness is what eventually leads to suffering. And then you struggle, you resist against the world the way it is, and that is what your ego does. It helps you operate in the real world by resisting against things you don't like. And that is a source also of a lot of unhappiness. So I actually think happiness is the absence of suffering. It comes from peace, and that comes from just being very careful about desire, judgment, and reactions, realizing that you don't really need something anymore, that something is not important to you. So to get very practical about it, I have a whole series of tricks that I use to try and be happier in the moment. And I started doing these a few years ago. And at first they were silly and difficult and required a lot of attention, but now some of them have become second nature. And I think doing them, I've just religiously, I've managed to increase my happiness level quite a bit. The obvious one is meditation, and insight meditation. So working towards a specific purpose on it, which is to try and understand how my mind works. But then just being very aware in every moment. So if I catch myself judging somebody, then I can stop myself and say, well, what's the positive interpretation of this? So I used to get annoyed about things. Now I always look for the positive side of it. And it used to take a rational effort. It used to take a few seconds for me to come up with a positive. Now I can do it sub-second. My brain is trained to do it automatically. Similarly, I try, there are other hacks. I could try to get more sunlight on my skin. That's an easy, cheap one. Look up and smile. Tell your friends that you're a happy person. Then you'll be forced to conform to it. You'll have the consistency bias. You have to live up to it. Your friends will expect you to be a happy person. These are little hacks. I mean, they add up over time. They're not going to pull you out of a severe depression. That's a much deeper, more difficult thing. But if you're just trying to upgrade your happiness ever so slightly, you can do it. Another hack would be just anytime you catch yourself desiring something, say, is it really that important to me that I'd be unhappy unless this goes my way? And you're going to find the vast majority of things it's just not true. I think dropping caffeine made me happier. It made me more of a stable person. Working out every day makes me happier. If you have peace of body, it's much easier to have peace of mind. The most important trick, I think, to being happy is to realize that happiness is a skill that you develop and a choice that you make. You choose to be happy and then you work at it. It's just like building muscles. It's just like losing weight. It's just like succeeding at your job. It's just like learning calculus. You decide it's important to you. You prioritize it above everything else. You read everything on the topic and then you work at it. And again, I think the Buddhists have done a lot of good work on this. I don't think modern science has good answers here. I think the modern world is actually really bad. The modern world is full of distractions. Things like Twitter and Facebook are not making you happy. They're actually making you unhappy. You're essentially playing a game that's created by the creators of those systems. And yes, it can be a useful game once in a blue moon, but most of the time you're just wasting your time. You're engaging in envy, dispute, and resentment, comparison, jealousy, anger about things that frankly just don't matter.